Start in a comfortable seated position.
I have your bolster.
Oh, that's good. That's perfect. I got a twin bolster for it right here. All right, so from your seat, take a little time, settle in, make yourself comfortable. My meditation teacher, Gil Fronsdale, I heard him say once that he's observed over years of teaching and practicing meditation that the people that spend the longest getting settled are the ones that are able to maintain the poses in the most gratifying way. And then stack the joints, float your head over your shoulders, over your hips. And let's start creating space. The chakras are aligned along the spinal column. So press down into your seat, lengthen out of your heart and the crown of your head. So the whole spinal column lengthens. And then maybe on an exhale breath, maintain that length in your spinal column. Let all of your soft tissues fall down toward the earth. Let's start this morning with a cleansing breath. Drawing a nice, deep, life-affirming inhale. And then open your mouth, sigh that out with a ha sound. Ha. From here, 3 times, I'll cue for an inhale, and you can choose to join me for making a yam sound, Y-A-M. So think of this like it's a little bit like if you were chanting Om, but the sound is yam instead. So you make that sound for the full extent, the full length of your exhale. And if that's not comfortable for you, you can just sit in silence. Inhale. Yeah. As you chant Yam, shift your attention to your heart, particularly the right side of your heart, an area about the size of your thumb, your spiritual heart. Inhale. Yeah. Notice the effect of this, the vibrations of making the sound, maybe resonating throughout your body. Inhale. Yeah. Come back to a comfortable, natural breath. For this next exercise, for everything else, you could leave your eyes open or closed, but I'll ask you to gently blink them open for now. And I'd like you to extend your left arm forward, palm of the left hand facing the earth, and then extend your right arm in front of you as well, but the palm is facing up toward the stars. Make closed fists and release, and then repeat that as quickly as you can, about 12 times. Opening and closing the fist. And it might be more than 12 times, but I'd like you to shoot for at least 12 times, and unless this is causing you some pain. And then come to an apparent pause, change sides. Right palm faces down toward the earth. Left palm faces up toward the stars. Close and release your fist as quickly as you can, at least 10 times. So one of the features of this chakra themed class this morning will be, I'll be giving you an affirmation for each shape. All right, come to an apparent pause. Now bring your hands, I don't know, what is that, 8 or 12 inches in front of your chest, palms face each other. And start out maybe a foot apart and start to close the hands and maybe close down the eyes here. And slow the closing of the hands so it's really slow and deliberate. And I'd like you to literally feel for a flow of the energy between the hands. If you feel nothing, if you get crickets during this exercise, that's okay. But that exercise, it's an exercise intended to open the hand chakras. And for a lot of people, particularly if they've never done this, get a really tangible sense of energy. And it's just a nice entry point into any discussion of the chakras. So as when I give you a pose, if it wasn't good for your body, if the pose was hurting you, I would hope and expect and support that you would change the pose, you would modify it, you would back out of the pose, or you would just not do it, find an alternate. If I give you an affirmation that's not working for you, if it's harmful to your psyche, I would hope, expect, and support that you would modify it, adapt it, or just not do it at all. Release your hands down to your lap. In the first yin shape of our practice this morning, it's going to be Sphinx pose. So I'd like you to come down onto your belly, and I'd like you to have a block close to the top edge of your mat. And you guys keep moving in that direction. I just want to make sure, and I did start recording. Good. So slide the hands forward until your shoulders are floating over your elbows, and place a block probably at the highest setting. It might be different for you, roughly between the wrists. Now lengthen your left legs long behind you. And then soften the lower body, everything from your lower back all the way down to the tips of your toes softens. So maybe here your ankles fold to the inside of the outside. That's fine. And there will be a bit of muscular engagement you'll need in order to keep your shoulders floating over your elbows. But what you don't need here, start to release, including maybe releasing your forehead down to the earth, including maybe slumping a little bit in between the shoulder blades. And the words that I'd like you to turn over in your head while we're in this shape are, there is an infinite supply of love. The common sticking points in this pose are in the belly and in the glutes. So check in with your belly, check in with your lower back, check in with the glutes, and look for any muscular engagement. You don't need any here. And in fact, muscular engagement in the belly and the low back in particular will prevent you from getting some of the benefit you might otherwise get from this pose. So check in, and if you notice that, see if you can let that go. Release it, maybe a little bit at a time, maybe all at once. In a conventional look, modern look at the chakra system, we boil this down into 7 energy centers, roughly aligned along the spinal column. And of those 7, the lower 3, Muladhara or root, Swadhisthana or sacral, and Manipura, solar plexus, all relate to various aspects of our physical selves, our physical existence, our physicality. In the upper 3 chakras, Vishuddha, which is throat, Ajna, third eye, and Sahasrara, the crown chakra, all relate to our intellect and expression. So that's 6. The upper 3 chakras all relate to connection to divine consciousness. So the lower 3 chakras are linked to earth, the upper 3 chakras are linked to heaven. And the bridge between those two happens in the 4th chakra, which is Anahata, the heart chakra. All right, check in with your body, notice your current level of sensation. And if you're straddling that threshold between discomfort and pain, so on a scale from 0 to 10, you're at a 4 to a 6, you're home right now, you're exactly where you should be, don't change anything. If you've opened up some space in your body once more, palms face down, turn your fingers out, start pressing into the heels of your hands until the elbows lift, and then mindful of compression in your lower back. If your body wants even more, the closer you walk the heels of your hands in towards your waist, the more sensation you'll add. Now, note, what did you have to give up along the way? Right, so a really common sacrifice that I've made in my practice here is in the glutes. So if you chose to transition from Sphinx into Seal, as I've just done, check in with your seat. And if you find some gripping or muscular engagement, once again, choose to soften and let that go. And then check in again, whether you're in Sphinx or Seal, what's happening in the upper body? Have you taken on muscular engagement in the forehead, the jaw, maybe the shoulders, and see if you can release some of that. What I'm learning about the chakra system is in each chakra, we can be underdeveloped. We can have an inadequate flow of energy through that energy center, or we can be excessive. So the energy level is flowing too high. And the consequence of being out of balance in that way in either direction is that the adjacent chakras, either immediately above, immediately below, or both, have to compensate, which means they're out of balance too. So when the heart chakra, when anahata is open and balanced, we are able to easily feel love and compassion for beings outside of our immediate family and pets. When we get into the next shape, I can tell you some of the signs that we may be either excessive or constricted or blocked. All right, so if you chose seal pose, come down onto your forearms. So I'd like all of us in Sphinx for now, and we're just going to use this sort of as a reset, but also as a transition. Reset only if you did seal. Now switch your block to the medium height. Slide your left hand forward, so create a big generous space under your left arm. And then thread your right arm under your chest across the front plane of your body, palm facing the sky. Now left arm wraps over your right. So tuck them in so they're truly under your chest. Both palms face up. Walk, walk, walk the fingers out in opposite directions. Note the sensation, maybe in the tops or the sides of the shoulders, but also the space between the shoulder blades. And then stay right here, or tuck your toes under your feet. Rock the crown of your head forward toward the top edge of your mat. And then if you can, everything softens. So the block under the forehead, for me, is just a support for my head that allows me to keep from slumping in the neck. We do so much slumping in our day-to-day lives, whether we're looking at smartphones or laptop computers or what have you, that for me, I don't want to reinforce that in my practice. This broken branch shape, one of the things I love about it, we don't have to, once that we're set up, we're getting the sensation, the threshold between discomfort and pain in the target area. So this is the tops, the outside of the shoulders, and the rhomboids, the space between the shoulder blades. We don't have to do anything, we can just be. So if we are attentive and we find ourselves doing, that is muscular engagement somewhere, it's a nice place to practice identifying that and letting it go. All right, check in with your body. Notice your current level of sensation. You don't have to change anything. But if you've opened up some space in your body once more, two tools I can think of. One, walk your fingers further out to opposite sides, or tuck your toes back under your feet, rock the crown of your head, even further forward. So we come into this world, we're born into this world. For most of us, with our chakras, the energies are balanced and aligned. And then immediately as we start to rub ourselves up against life, we're traumatized. It's just the nature of life. So we're traumatized in small ways. We're traumatized sometimes in big ways. We're traumatized physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And our response to this trauma often either changes the energy in the chakra in one direction or the other, depending on the nature of the trauma and how that interfaces with the chakra, either becoming excessive or deficient. All right, friends, if you rock the crown of your head forward, tuck your toes under your feet, unwind, walk your heels backwards, and then unwind with the left arm, come back to our starting position. So the palm of that left hand on the earth forward of your mat. Sphinx with the right arm. Sphinx with the left arm. Now change sides, slide your right hand forward, big generous space under your right elbow, thread your left arm under your chest across the front plane of your body. Right arm threads over your left. Arc the fingers out in opposite directions. And then stay right here. If you're getting the sensation you need here, there's no need to change anything else. You may actually be getting too much. If that's the case, step one might be to turn your palms down toward the earth. But otherwise, if you want more, tuck your toes under your feet, rock the crown of your head forward. So I told you what balance looks like in the heart chakra. What does out of balance look like? In the case of someone who has a deficient flow of energy in the heart chakra, and first of all, these are not character flaws. These are not character flaws. These are survival strategies that we take on through our lives that we needed to survive some phase of our life. Right? So when we notice these imbalances and we start to recognize what the cause was, noticing with curiosity and kindness is really helpful. Noticing it with shame is not. Right? So we need to give ourselves a little bit of grace and remember that at some point in our lives, we needed this strategy to survive. If your body wants even more sensation, tuck your toes under your feet, rock the crown of your head forward, or slide your arms further apart in opposite directions. So insufficient flow of energy on the Hatha chakra looks like someone for whom love and compassion just don't come easily. Right? They don't naturally flow. It's not that they can't feel it for anyone. Right? The closest people in their lives, they'll be able to feel those emotions for, but sometimes with conditions. But they don't come easily and naturally, and they just straight up often don't come at all for people outside of immediate family or pets. Right? So this person is armored up. They're protecting their heart. In the language of vinyasa yoga, if we look at the warrior series, because this condition of armoring up is really common, and we all do this at times, and some of us maintain that state throughout our lifespans. But in the language of yoga, if you look at the warrior series of poses from vinyasa, warrior 1 is a closed hip standing pose. Warrior 2 is an open hip standing pose. Warrior 3 is a balancing pose. So on the surface, they don't seem to have that much in common. But as near as I can tell, the common factor for all three of those poses is that the heart is open. The warrior is courageous because she chooses to walk through the world with an open heart. It's the hardest thing we're asked to do. Tuck your toes under your feet. Walk your heels back behind you. Unwind the arms, maybe start position with the right arm. Sphinx with the left. And then you can lower your heart down to the earth. Maybe take a moment and shake your arms out for a counter stretch. And maybe especially if you've got compression in the lower back, maybe drop the hips a little bit from side to side. Right hip point comes down and touches the earth first, and then the left, and work through that a few times. And then there's no great rush, but I'd like you to eventually slide your hands under your shoulders, lift up into a tabletop shape. And I'd like you to have 2 blocks set up close to the top edge of your mat, which you may or may not choose to use, but I want you to have that as an option. And I'd like you to have your bolster close by. Right, so from this tabletop shape, float Your shoulders over your wrists, float your hips over your knees. Now with the hips, when we move into the shape, the tendency is the hips are probably gonna wanna come forward. For some people, they may press back, like closer to a child's pose. So that's okay, but the goal is hips will stay floating over the knees. What we're gonna take is Anahatanasana, puppy dog pose. Notice the root Sanskrit word, Anahata, right? It's the same as our heart, our resounding sound. Walk the hands about 3 handprints forward. Take the hands out wide, particularly if the shoulders are tweaked. And then start releasing, with the hips floating over the knees, start releasing your forehead or your heart down to the earth. Right, this is the shape, but right away, I want you to straddle that threshold between discomfort and pain, but I want you to check in with one very specific form of sensation. If you are getting pinching in the tops of the shoulders, that is not the kind of discomfort I want you to sit with. And if that's the case, I would like you to place a bolster under your heart and just rest your forehead or your heart down on this bolster. So the person with deficient flow of energy in the heart chakra, love and compassion, they can feel it, but it doesn't come easily. And when it does come, sometimes it's conditioned, right? So they have great boundaries, but maybe a little too restricted. Not maybe, they are very restricted. So what does overdeveloped look like? Maybe if the energy in the heart chakra is excessive, maybe someone who falls in love in a way that we just can't understand is so quick. They fall so fast and so hard. Or maybe it's codependency. That's often the case. So codependency on its surface, it looks like empathy and compassion on steroids, but it's a totally different quality. With empathy and compassion, the needs of that other person, we're feeling that for them. We're feeling that for them. Whereas codependency is we are dependent upon them. So this other person, this can happen with any relationship in our lives. And I think we all go through this sometimes. But if that person in our life, if we are codependent with them, if they have a good day, they're in a good mood, we have a good day, we're in a good mood. If they have a bad day, if they're in a bad mood, we have a bad day, we're in a bad mood. So how do we tell the difference? There are a few ways. Like one of the things, because I've been in codependent relationships and I've been in healthier relationships. This is just my experience, but I feel like when we're in a healthy, non-codependent relationship, our time together and our love together with that partner, whatever the nature of that relationship is, we tend to grow bigger. But if we're codependent in that relationship, we tend to get smaller, sometimes to the point where we either have nothing left to give or there's just nothing left of us. Right. So obviously, if we're deficient in the heart chakra and the goal is to be healthy and balanced in our body, mind, and spirit, then we'd like to increase the flow of energy through this chakra. And if we're excessive, then we'd like to slow it down, turn down the pressure in that particular hose. Right. Now, if you're fine right here with your sensation level, you don't have to change anything. If you want more, a couple of things. One, you can take those 2 blocks, slide them forward of you, bring your elbows onto the blocks, and then as you release your heart, as your heart melts down to the earth, drop your thumbs in between your shoulder blades. So the good news with the heart chakra, and again, this is just my opinion, is I feel like my experience has given me some anecdotal evidence to believe that this is a chakra. Like, for example, I'm excessive in my root chakra and my sacral chakra. And I have some practices that I do to try to release some of the energy from there. But like I can't, as far as I know, based on my experience with thinking and studying things like this, I can't just consciously go, okay, I'm releasing energy from my root chakra. right? If I have that capacity, I haven't found it yet. The heart chakra, I think, really responds well to conscious decisions to open and close. And we've all done this. So I'll give you a couple of examples. All right, we're going to start to shift out of this, whatever version of this you're in. Maybe you're in your hands, maybe you're in your bolster, maybe your elbows are up on blocks. The most gentle way, rather than muscling your way out, I would prefer that you rock the crown of your head forward, bring weight maybe into the forearms first, and allow your hips to release down to the earth. And then you can lower your whole heart down to the earth. And then from there, I'd like you to roll up onto your right side, use good body mechanics in this transition into almost a right forearm plank. Grab a block, and I'd like you to plug this block in under your armpit. Now, you may have with me before done a serratus anterior trigger point release. That's not what we're doing here. Rather, what I would like you to do, the block is wholly in your armpit. Now, left hand comes down to the mat between your chest and the left hand edge of your mat. Slide your right elbow forward until you can release the right hand side of your head into your right hand. So the weight of your body now is pressing into that block, and where it's pressing is in the armpit. If it makes it easier for you to be stable, you could also put a little bend in the knees here. All right, so the left hand has a job. So I want that threshold between discomfort and pain, but for none of us to, I don't particularly want any of us to be in tears here. So if it's too much sensation, that left hand can press down into the mat or into your block to relieve some of the sensation. So you guys both know, I live with Nikki, my best friend, and her son Tristan. And in Nikki's house is this entryway off the front door, and it's right outside the door of my bedroom. And it's a tile floor, and it's sunny and open. It's a beautiful place to practice. So I practice there a lot. And I was experimenting with this pose, which functionally is a subscapularis release, which lends itself to the work that we're doing today. And Tristan came home from school, and he was walking upstairs to his bedroom. So to come from the living room to the stairs, you have to see this entryway area where I was practicing, right? So I'm doing this pose right here, and Tristan comes in, and he sees me, and he pauses, and then he turns and he walks up the stairs, and he's probably 4 or 5 stairs he go up, and I hear him stop, and he turns around, and then he comes back down, and he looks at me and says, "What is that, Chris, fashion model pose?" So he was, of course, making fun of me a little bit. The good news is I didn't have a name for this pose in my journal before, and now I do. So this is fashion model pose. All right, so I'm going to give you an option here if you've opened up a little space that will add sensation. And if it's too much, if you're already getting too much, you need that left hand for support, I wouldn't change anything. But otherwise, release your right hand down to the mat between your chest and the left hand edge of your mat. Left hand covers your right. And then release your forehead down onto the back of your left hand. And your hips, the left side of your body may start to reach forward toward the mat a little bit, toward the left hand edge of your mat. That's okay. I was a pretty sensitive little boy. And we live in a society where there's lots of pressure on both males and females, right? But our society, in a lot of ways right now, doesn't particularly value sensitive men and boys, right? And so we have these societal pressures that we learn on the playground, that we learn on the school bus, that we learn in schools everywhere, that help little boys learn to armor up the heart a little bit. That makes that kind of sensitivity in men and boys tends to make people uncomfortable until we get to a certain age, I think. Right. So I responded to that. I didn't know what was happening at the time, of course, but I was adding layers of armor to my heart. And then I went through a path after high school of military service, adding more layers of armor to my heart.
So my heart was pretty closed off in a lot of ways. It wasn't in every way, but in a lot of ways it was. Start to lift your forehead up off your hands, and then left hand down to your mat again. Lift up enough that you can remove the block, and use good body mechanics, but roll over onto your left side. Now, just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to do a little bit of a break dance. And by the way, our affirmation here is, I love myself unconditionally. The left side, this left forearm plank, plug the block up under your left armpit. Bring your right hand down to the mat, in between your torso with the right hand edge. Walk that right up, whoops, and then release the left hand side of your head and face down onto your left hand. Right, and then I came to a consistent yoga practice, and one of the side benefits, it's not what most of us go to yoga for, but what tends to happen for people is the practice starts to slice away layers of armor from our psyche, right? So in my case, the heart was pretty armored. The practice was helping me to remove layers of armor from the heart. But I got stuck at a certain point where there were fewer layers of armor, but not none. And then I had this experience. I had this little dog, Molly. She was a toy poodle terrier cross. And she was a perfect blend of, like if ever there was an angel that I had on this earth, and I could tell you a kind of a hippy dippy story about this, but I'll save it for another occasion. But if ever there was an angel incarnate, it was little Molly. She was a bright spot in the world, brightest soul I've ever encountered. My family, we had her for a long time, but she was small, and part of the problem with her breed is they had knee problems. So toward the end of her life, she couldn't walk well. So she didn't go for walks. She didn't get much activity. And one of her big joys in life was to eat, right? So she struggled with her weight. And then when she was 13, we took her to the vet, and we found out she was diabetic. So the vet gave us insulin shots for her and gave us instructions. And we started giving her insulin shots. And then about a week after we started the shots, we made a trip to Florida for Christmas to spend the holidays, mom and dad, with you. And on the trip, on the way over, Molly's condition cratered and she got really, really sick. So we sped to Florida. We took her right to an animal hospital, almost right away. We did go to the house first, but just barely. Went to the animal hospital, and the vet saw us, and they kept her under observation for almost a week. And the vet said, her organs are shutting down. Molly's not responding well to the insulin. So and she's going into seizures. So we're gonna keep her for observation. So we went to see her maybe 6 days. We went every day, at least once a day, to see her. And I thought at that time, I thought about how she had given her whole heart to our family, her entire existence. Right, before we go any further, you can stay right here. Option to release your left hand down to your mat. Right hand covers the back of your left hand. Release your forehead down to the back of your right hand. She'd given her whole heart to her family for her whole life. She'd given everything. And one of the commitments that I made to myself at the beginning of this is, I'm not going to numb this feeling. I'm going to let myself feel this. This dog deserves that for me. So that week in going, I thought we were visiting Molly, but what we eventually found out throughout the week is we were saying goodbye to her. I openly cried in front of more people during that week than I had my entire life leading up to that. And I didn't know what was happening at the time, but that experience changed things with my heart. And I feel like the last layers of armor were stripped away and my heart was open, which felt really good. But at the same time, is probably for a while too much energy, right? So my heart was open and I could easily and readily cry, and I did. So I went through about a year and a half when I cried at the drop of a hat. I cried in movies. I cried in commercials. It would be an exaggeration, but not by much to say I cried when drivers let a pedestrian cross in a crosswalk. I cried a lot. And that also gave me an experience of being in a codependent relationship at some point where my heart was maybe too open for that circumstance. Right. But I feel like since then, I've been able to find a healthier balance. And there are times where consciously or unconsciously, I choose to armor up and close off my heart a little bit. But I have some good tools available now to help me figure out how to strip that armor away and reopen things. So that's my story of how I feel like the heart responds more than maybe any other chakra in my experience to conscious requests for us to open and close it. All right, start to lift your forehead up, walk your hands under your shoulders, press yourself up, and then maybe come up onto your knees. So we're going to set up for saddle pose. Now, for some bodies, this is not going to be a super friendly shape. So I'm going to set this up with the least amount of sensation, and you can try this. And if this doesn't work at all, I'll give you something else you can do. All right, but start out with one block, set across your mat at the lowest setting, probably where the long edge of the block is perpendicular to the long edge of your mat. And then what is that, 12 or 14 inches behind that, a block at the highest setting. Now take your bolster, lay that over both blocks. My yin teacher, Annie, she calls this the lazy boy recliner. So we're gonna start out initially with a half saddle. So with a half saddle, maybe left leg, the left heel is set back behind the left knee. Right leg is extended long. And then see if you can lay yourself down onto the mat. And I'm getting a little assist here from my partner in crime, Bella, the Irish Doodle. Right, so where might you feel this? You might feel this in the top of the knee, the quadriceps. So if it's pain, but it's a diffuse pain, like it's spread out over a big area there, that's okay, we can live with that. If it's sharp focus and you can point to it with one finger, don't stay here. So what I would have you do in that case is to have your knees more or less together, but heels apart, and sit back onto one or two blocks, and you'll feel that same work in the quadriceps, right? But for some bodies, you may be able to easily and naturally come all the way down onto forearms or all the way down onto the mat. So I'm not there in my practice yet. I'm going to take a full saddle, but I'm going to do it with this lazy boy recliner in place. And the words that I'll ask you to turn over in your heart in this shape are, my heart is open. So I mentioned feel some pressure and some stretch in the quadriceps above the knees, but you might also feel this in the hip flexors. So one of the quadriceps, it's called the rectus femoris, runs all the way up to the hip, and that's also a hip flexor. So it would not be unusual if you felt a lot of sensation there. You might feel openness in space along the front plane of your body. But we don't live in the same body, friends. So your sensation here may be really different from mine, and that's okay. That's planned. The words to turn over in your heart are, my heart is open. So if you're in a half saddle, if you have one leg folded back, roll over onto the forearm on the same side that that leg is folded. And then just change sides. Tuck that other leg back behind you, lengthen the leg that was tucked behind you long. friends. Use good body mechanics and take your time to start lifting yourself up from the shit. And if you've created the lazy boy recliner, you can move that out of the way. And where we're going next, you're going to need at least one block, maybe two, and maybe your bolster. But come down onto your back. We're going to take a restorative bridge. So on your back, put a generous bend in your knees, soles of your feet on the mat. Take a visual look, confirm that your feet and knees are hip distance apart. And then you can start to press down into your feet, lift your thighs, lift your hips. Start with one block at the lowest height and try that. Reach your arms out over your head is an option, right? This feels really good in my body. It might not feel good for yours. Now, if the block is too firm and that pressure in your low back doesn't feel good, use a bolster. And if you like more space and lift, another option is lift up, place a second block at that lowest height under the first block, right? So lots of space and lift here. So if we were doing restorative bridge, well, first of all, the words I'd like you to turn over your head is, love is my guiding truth and I follow it. Love is my guiding truth and I follow it. So in some settings, when we would give you a bridge on a block like this, I might cue you to continue pressing into your feet, especially the heels, engaging the legs. But that's not what I'm interested in here. Right? I'm interested in opening in your hip flexors, the front plane of your body, and gently draining most of the blood in your body down toward the heart and the head. Right? So legs can be pretty disengaged here, really soft, like a wet noodle. All right, friends, we're going to begin the work of starting to transition to our next pose. So maybe you start by releasing your arms so they're no longer up over your head. Lift yourself up, press into your feet, lift yourself up enough that whatever support you've created for yourself
You can sit off to the side. And then roll over onto either side. Press yourself up, and we're going to be setting up for another heart opener. You can choose between restorative fish or heart bench. So if you're familiar with those and you know what you want, you can move right into it. But if you're not, that's okay. So for a restorative fish, take your bolster, lay it on the mat so the long edge of your bolster is parallel to the long edge of your mat. Probably, roughly start the bottom of the bolster roughly half the length of your mat. And then maybe even place a block on top of this bolster. And then as you come onto your back again here, lay the bottom of that bolster at the bottom of your rib cage. Landmark for that, it's bra strap level. And then release yourself down onto the mat, maybe again with the head on the block, or maybe you remove the block. Right? You could do, actually don't recommend butterfly legs right now for a reason, but like not as a matter of course, just specifically in this practice. You could place the soles of your feet on the earth, or you could lengthen your legs long. All of those are options. Or for heart bench, which is what I'm going to choose, replace the bolster with a block at the medium height. A second bolster behind it, what is that, 4 to 6 inches? And then the bottom edge of the bolster at the bottom of your rib cage, and then come to rest on this mat. But either option, what I recommend here, based on what we're trying to do with this practice, is release the backs of your hands down to the mat, out to your sides. So arms roughly teed out. And that way, either the pressure of the bolster or your block pressing into your spinal column may allow your shoulder blades to fall down toward the earth on either side, which is what I'm looking for here. And the words that I'll ask you to turn over in your head here are, I choose love every single day. I choose love every single day. Most people who practice yoga for a while come to understand that we frequently store emotions and experiences in our body, right? It's really common. So for a lot of people, that seems to be the hips. So for example, in frog or in pigeon, I know lots and lots of people who in a deep hip opening, a deep frog or a really deep half pigeon, emotions arise up and they're moved to tears. Right? That's not my experience with hip openers. Sometimes I get angry, right? Because the sensation is high and because they're frustrated for me. But that emotion is fairly organic and just is my emotional response to that stimuli. But this sense of heart opening for me, this heart bench, if I'm feeling closed off in the heart, this is money. This will help me feel open and free again, which often looks like tears, but in a really good way. All right, friends, we're going to begin our transition. So let me say first, if you chose restorative fish and you have the bolster under your back, The only change that you'll need to make this transition is butterfly the legs. So bring the soles of your feet together. Let gravity draw your knees down to the earth until the pinky edge blades of your feet rest on the earth. Right. And if you're on blocks, you could do this on blocks. I'm going to choose to transition to a bolster and take this as a restorative butterfly. But again, I recommend, unless it gives you some kind of pain or discomfort or your shoulders anywhere else, have the arms out to the side here. It's the heart opening is my primary interest. I feel like another thing that really closes us down in the heart is fear, when we live in chronic fear. So from a Western science perspective, you can think of this as a sympathetic nervous system response. Right? So the central nervous system, when it goes into sympathetic nervous system response, we're in fight or flight. Right, so physically that looks like an elevated heart rate. It's like an elevated body temperature. But emotionally, it's really a pretty negative place to be. So it can look like we interpret anything from kind of a negative lens. I lived in fear for much of my life. And I remember this entry that I wrote in the journal when I was a young man. I was in the Army. So why I still remember this, it must have been powerful for me. But I wrote in this journal, I see the faces of my enemies, even in the countenances of my friends. Right, so hacking the nervous system can really help and support this heart opening work. So I'm going to give you the option of a central nervous system down regulating breath to take if you choose. So I'll describe it first. It's a 4-8 breath, and I'll cue you for a 4-count inhale through your nose, followed by an 8-count exhale through your mouth, making a ha or an ocean sound. Right, so if you'd like to try implementing this breath, and you can maintain this even through the final resting shape if you choose, but exhale out all your breath first, and then inhale through your nose for 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale ha for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale. Exhale. Inhale. Exhale. And if you chose to experiment with that breath, keep that flow going to your own pace at your own count. So that length of time that we went for some people is enough time with that breath to notice a difference in how they're feeling. So if we chronically live in fear, a little of that breath at the right time can make a huge difference. Right, and that's a tool that you always have available. It's your breath. Our breath is our birthright as humans. It doesn't cost anything. And most of the time you could do that breath with nobody around you knowing what you were doing. So when you need it, it is there for you. And this can help to trigger a parasympathetic nervous system response. So in contrast with sympathetic, which is fight or flight, parasympathetic is our rest and digest nervous system. So don't change anything for now. We're going to begin our transition into a final resting shape. What I would want you to know is this can be anything. It doesn't have to look like anyone else's.
So for example, in this restorative butterfly, I'm really happy right here. I feel like I can easily balance both relaxation and alertness. So I'm going to choose to stay right here. But use good body mechanics if you change, but feel free to make your way into any final resting shape on your seat, your belly, your back, or your side. My sisters, as we start to make this transition, this final transition in our practice, know that you can totally choose to not do it. If what your body is calling for is more rest, you could close out the practice exactly where you are. But you could also start to add an element of movement, right? So if you choose that, begin to reanimate your body with any small or large movements, including a deeper breath. Bring the palms of your hands together in front of your face. Rub your palms together to warm them, generate lots of heat. And then place the heel of your hands at the bottom of your eye socket. And just let your palms flatten out over your arms. And sit here with just a very light neutral pressure. And then you could, if you chose, start to radiate outward, circling, massaging your whole face and neck. And if you're on your back, roll over onto either side into a fetal position. Take 4 or 5 breaths. Just check in, notice how you're feeling. Honor yourself for your devotion to your practice, the hard work that you put in. This is not an easy practice. And the courage you showed in rolling your mat out And then press yourself up into a seated position. From here, take the index finger and thumb of both hands and bring them to the eyebrows, but bring them so that the thumbs are right at the bridge of the nose and the fingers are just above them, and start tweezing the flesh here and work your way out closer toward the temples. Take your thumbs, place them in the top and the center of your eye sockets, and then maybe release your forehead any amount forward and down. So you have a little pressure in the tops and center of those eye sockets from your thumbs. And then release there. Take index fingers of both hands, place them in the center and bottom of your eye sockets, and lift your chin any amount until you get that similar effect with the bottom of the eye socket. We already did this once, but we're going to do it one more time. Take the heels of your hands, place them on the bottom of your eye sockets, cup your hands over your eyes, maybe release your forehead slightly forward, any amount more. And then you can remove your hands, start to lift your hands up, come back to stack joints. And we're going to close with the option of a single communal yam, Y-A-M, which is the bija, the seed sound for Anahata, heart chakra. So let's start with a cleansing breath. Run a nice deep inhale. Exhale, open your mouth, let that go. And I'll cue for an inhale. You can choose to join us for a yam, or you can choose not to yam. Inhale. Yeah. Thank you, friends, for allowing me to guide you through your practice this morning. I invite you to bring your thumbs to the space between your eyebrows, the Ajna chakra. Blessings to you and your family. And that concludes our practice for today. Great job.